going to change my view so that the Zoom recording looks right. Okay. Once again, thank you for coming to our third and final Tripscy Open Forum during this really complex and challenging time of change. It's been really wonderful to have all these opportunities to come together with all providers across different disciplines. Excuse me, I'm going to close my Outlook because it keeps chiming at me while I'm talking. Okay. Over the past few weeks, we have touched on many different topics. The two topics that came up as top interests and priorities for today were ESY services and assessment. I'm going to touch on ESY first. I personally don't have a whole lot of content on ESY. In fact, I would say I have very little content on ESY. Rather, I feel like I'm sort of opening the floor for that conversation. And if it doesn't take up a long period of time, I do have relatively more actual content to offer on the topic of assessment, but I want to create space to talk about ESY. Before I get started, though, I do want to mention for anyone that didn't either see the email or hasn't heard about it, Vermont Family Network is hosting a town hall forum with AOE special education representatives at 3 o'clock today, and it is on the topic of ESY. The way that they are framing it is it's a clarification of the memo that was sent around on May 8th about ESY and differentiating ESY from compensatory services. So perhaps after that, we may have more information about sort of what's coming from the top about how ESY will be provided or what it will look like, maybe not. But I have that link right here, and I'm going to copy it into the chat box for us. And so on that topic, I'm also planning to try and wrap us up like 10 to 15 minutes early so that everyone can get an eye and brain break before that event, because I suspect that probably a lot of people are wanting to go to that event. So on the topic of ESY, like I said, I don't have a lot personally to offer. There were a lot of really interesting ideas that came up last time that we met about the idea of doing it sort of summer camp style. I'm thinking I would like to just open the floor and find out. I know also that many people work for different districts, and different districts may be offering different policies. But if anybody wants to speak up and speak to what you're hearing from your district or districts about how ESY services will be provided, and whether you and or whether you've had any ideas about how you are thinking of providing ESY services or offering value to your students via a remote model, or are there any school districts that are saying that they're going to be doing ESY in person? Any of those questions? I'm just going to pause for a second and see if anybody either speaks up via chat or directly.
So we had a meeting this morning about it, and I think what we're offering is teletherapy with the hope that there are some of the kids that we have that are not going to work on teletherapy, and we just know it at this point. So the hope is that we may have some kids coming in live to our center, but we're waiting for people to tell us, how do we do that? What do we have to wear? You know, what's the PPE that we got to do? All of that. So that's the plan right now.
Thanks for sharing that, Anne. Yeah, that hybrid model. Have other people heard directives from their SUs about what kind of models they might be using?
We're still getting a lot of, I don't know, and wait and see. We are pretty sure that all of our early ed ESY programming will be remote. We're still waiting on directives for K-12 and what that's going to look like. If there is any type of K-12 summer programming, it looks like it will probably be shortened than, its usual time. But as far as ESY services, we are still waiting for direction. And we had a meeting, our special ed director was in one of our meetings this morning, and that was basically her statement was, we're still waiting for direction. So who knows?
So one of my districts is just going to do remote, and I was told that we had to write new DLPs for summer services. Has anybody else been told that?
Yes, that's a directive from the state.
So more paperwork.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hi, Karen said Essex Westford is offering both remote and in-person OT and PT based on family requests for ESY. Location may be in the home or in the building. They're not sure now. Thanks, Karen.
Karen, does that also include special education services and SLP services, or that's just how OT and PT are being provided? I'm so curious if it's just really a case-by-case basis.
Hold on, let me connect here. We had a discussion this morning, and it was mainly the OTs and the PTs that were there at the meeting with the special ed directors. The district sent out questionnaires to the families and asked the families what they wanted. And this is for only special ed eligible students. And most of these students, they have to fit the ESY requirements that they would have a significant loss over the summer if they didn't receive services. So it's not all of the special ed students. We right now have one of our PTs and one of our OTs that are willing to do in person, with masks, etc. And that whole conversation about where this will occur, we didn't get into a lot of detail because now we're still dealing with the buildings and trying to figure out how buildings management is going to be fixing up the buildings in the summer to get ready for the fall. So we didn't have a discussion of location, but many of our families would like face-to-face as opposed to distance learning, but other families are doing fine with distance learning. So I'm not sure about SLPs. I would assume that we didn't have the conversation with the SLPs.
Thank you. Do people have, Heather says, Maple Run is wait and see, definitely no home visits. Lawyer said the environment is too risky. Yeah. Yeah.
Can I add one more thing?
Of course.
And another piece that was discussed this morning, we're still getting feedback from the liability insurance that covers the district about the in-person visit, so things could change. But right now, our PT and, as I said, one of our OTs, they're willing to do face-to-face. And, we're really concerned about a lot of our students that have significant motor challenges and their positioning, their equipment, all of that. Just to be able to see that and really see it in person is what the emphasis would be. So again, these are consultative visits. They're not direct service visits.
Thank you. Yeah, that's an interesting point also, that even if you were to see them in person, it would be more like just a periodic consultation. Is that pretty consistent on anyone that's heard that the services would be much more limited in terms of scope and hours? I mean, it has been during the school year for the vast majority of students as well. Yeah, I see Anne nodding. Yeah.
And you also have to remember that Essex Westford really follows a consultative model.
Right.
Very rarely do we have direct service written on the IEPs. Yeah.
Right. That's a good point. Do people feel like, and I just want to guide this conversation in the direction it feels most valuable to go. I'm going to look back at the chat. Lillian says, I was thinking we would want to check in with our liability insurance to make sure we're covered if somehow kids or families could become infected with COVID through us as providers. Yeah. And Lindsay says, all attorneys are suggesting there's no face-to-face contact over the summer. That's what I was told for the summer. Yeah, those are, oh, you were told this morning, yeah. I think those are concerns that I think we're gonna have to face. Providers are gonna have to face those concerns at some point anyway. I think that's a really interesting question of whether that's something that it needs to be obviously determined on the statewide level in many ways, but also ultimately it's at the discretion of our liability insurance. And for people who are employees, sometimes our liability insurance is actually held by the institution that we work for too. So that changes the stakes a little bit.
Can I also say that this conversation that happened this morning is a draft, and everyone is waiting on AOE to hear what their recommendation is.
Yeah.
And again, that insurance liability question is a huge question. So basically, OTPT staff were polled by the special ed directors saying, would anyone be willing to do face-to-face? It's up to the therapist how they feel. And then we're going to have to wait and see, because even if someone's willing to do face-to-face, we may not be allowed to. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
And once there is face-to-face happening, whenever that is, this summer or next fall or whenever, there also may be some state requirement from OSHA for the training, safety training that everyone would have to go through before they can start. So that may be a question for your district as well, if they've got access to that. And right now, according to Jesse, who's the director of CDCI, he said there is one available, but he's not sure if it might not change. Of course, the safety guidelines, we don't know exactly what they are quite yet. So
again, are the special ed directors, the state level association, are they meeting with AOE? I would assume they are. You know, there's probably a lot of discussion happening at the upper level that we just don't know about yet. I hope, at least.
Do you mean, are you talking, when you say the state special ed directors, are you?
The association.
Oh, right.
You know,
yeah.
the Special Ed Director Association.
Right.
I would imagine they have to be, but I don't know that.
Yeah, I don't know the details of that.
Right. Yeah, I would wonder if people are doing face-to-face, if they would have to follow what's going on in hospitals. Face shield, mask, gloves, etc.
So I've been trying to find information about when home visiting, like nursing, like PT, OT home visiting, when that's like what the guidelines specifically for when that can start again. And as we've heard in some of our EI meetings, statewide meetings, some people just did it all the way through. Like their agencies let them do it with, yes, Lindsay saying yes. Go ahead, Lindsay.
Well, I just heard about from like I was in a meeting and another person in the meeting said they had a family member who gets PT and OT and through home health, and they had just started it up again.
Started up again.
So, sorry, did you not hear that? Yeah, it just started up again. I don't know if that was locally or somewhere else, but yeah, and I mean, our our early ed nurse, Carol Neary for the Burlington School District was, she's in a lot of those state level meetings. So every week when we have our early ed meeting, she comes back with like all these guidelines around PPE and face shields and changing your clothes. And it's incredibly overwhelming. And I hope we're in a different place in September because, you know, and we've had, our special ed director ordered 5,000 masks. I think for, I'm not sure who, but, students, staff, I'm not really sure, but yeah, things are, it's crazy.
I think outpatient OTPT opened, I want to say last week, that they can do face-to-face, but they have to take social distancing precautions and other precautions.
Right. Where
So,
people are going there, like clinic-based, is that what you mean?
clinic-based.
Yeah, that's what I agree. I believe that too.
Pam, are you in contact at all with Todd Patterson, who's the director of home health and hospice in Burlington?
I have not been, but
Okay.
I just was having this conversation with Jesse this morning
Okay.
about,
Well,
yeah.
actually, Todd is part of the Vermont OT Association board, and I can shoot him an email and see if he has any news to share and let you know.
That would be really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
So just catch up with the chat briefly. Anne said that they did a Vermont, is it a BOSHA? Is that Vermont OSHA?
BOSHA, yeah, Vermont OSHA. We had to do it for
Safety training, is that what you're talking about? Yeah. And Lillian suggested that some families would be happy to sign a release that would hold therapists harmless for any COVID risks. Barb asked, how are masks being provided to kids? Is the school going to be responsible if they're doing face-to-face? That's a great question. Are schools going to be providing masks to children and families? Diane Solomon, I think SPED directors are meeting at least regionally. Thank you. State level meeting possibly yesterday. Phoebe said they did the BOSHA one as well. It was required both by districts and your insurance carrier. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. I think the meeting this afternoon will be interesting, enlightening. Sandra said for outpatient therapy, you need to have a screening prior to the appointment and only one person can be with the patient.
And I wanted to add to that for when seeing people in person, you have to do the screening to make sure they haven't had any, visitations with anybody that was known sick, if they've had any fever, respiratory issues. Me as a provider, I have to wear a mask. If it's a potential COVID infection, that's when I have to get fully suited up. And then for my policy, I change clothes in between seeing patients, or I only see one per day. Mm-hmm. So that kind of helps with the social distancing piece, but it's really complicated for sure.
Thanks.
Wow. Well, I think the other side of this conversation is for, Heather says, biomedics met a family in their vehicle to cast for new orthoses for a child that needed more than one caregiver present. Wow. That's pretty adaptable on part of the biomedics team. That couldn't have been easy for anybody, right? Go biomedics, yeah. The other side of this conversation is for people who are intending to provide a direct service model of ESY, or even those who are planning on providing a consultation model of ESY, what that might look like, or what you might actually provide, what you would offer. I don't know if Hannah's here today, but Hannah Bloom brought up some really, really cool ideas that sparked a lot of people's interest. I'm not seeing that Hannah was able to make it today. And I think it's kind of outside of the scope of this moment, but I'm wondering if people are interested in connecting and talking more about either resources or models or things that they are considering or offering for this remote ESY approach. can you add your name to the chat box and maybe write ESY so that when I scroll back through the notes, I know? Because I think that this would be a really great topic for more heads to be able to provide more robust offerings. I think that it's one thing when we're providing direct service and we're in there. When we're providing consultation, I love to be able to share resources and go back and forth. So if people are interested in collaborating on that, or even adding to a shared body of knowledge on ESY offerings and services, add your name and email address and ESY to the chat box. And then I'm going to put something out on Tripscy later with the notes and resources from this event so that people can connect on that topic if interested at all. So quiet. Okay. Does anybody else have any additional thoughts, considerations, concerns about ESY that you want to bring to this group? Great. Okay. So shifting gears, the other topic that came up that people were really interested in learning about was assessment, and this is an area that there's relatively more precedent for than providing remote ESY services. So I was able to find some information and resources that I hope will be helpful. Before I dig in, I know that when we brought this topic up a couple of weeks ago, Heather Blackburn, for example, said that you've been asked not to do any evaluation. Does anybody have the go-ahead to perform evaluations? Is anybody sitting on evaluations that they're waiting to perform? Or you can put it in the chat if that's more comfortable. Or has everyone been told not to perform evaluations while in remote learning?
So my evaluations, the whole bigger picture of evaluations has been put on hold in my district. If they're not going ahead with the full eval, then I'm not allowed to do my piece either.
Sure. Right. And does anybody know, is that something that came down from AOE, or is that something that's been, determined on a district by district basis?
It seems that it's more district by district, and in one of my districts, it was sort of driven by the school psychologists who felt they could not do a virtual evaluation via Zoom. We have been told that we can do additional assessments if it's in the form of a checklist that we might share with the family or share with the classroom teacher. So for instance, a self-care checklist that we can score, do a report on. But that hands-on piece of evaluation is definitely on hold.
Right.
Does anyone know if we were to do something like the TVPS that you could hold up and they could see on Zoom, does that negate any standardization?
I'm not sure. you
So,
know?
I'll have to look. I think it's Pearson Clinical is doing a webinar within the next week on doing assessments remotely right now.
What is that, Phoebe? Maybe you could type that in.
Yeah. Pearson Clinical. I'll look for the link. I'm on two devices because I'm taking notes here. Pearson Clinical is doing a webinar on remote assessment, and I have to think that since they're presenting it, there must be some formal assessments that can be done that way with validity. But that's all I know.
Yeah. So there are many assessment tools that are I'm actually going to interrupt myself and just say that a resource that Pam actually put out on Ripsky a couple of weeks ago that I want to mention again is a 4-day pediatric, let me find the title of it. It's the Ehealth Summit for Pediatric Therapists. And it's got a massive number of offerings, including offerings for working for school-based therapists, EI, underserved populations, tech challenges, assessment was one of the topics, and it's free of charge, and it starts today. Some of the hours are really strange, but
because it's international.
Because it's international, right? It's based in New Zealand, but many of the therapists are from within the United States, which means that they'll be discussing things, under kind of IDEA rules and understandings and things like that. And it's $50 to get a year of access, which includes certificates of attendance for any sessions that you attend. So I think it's I haven't actually attended any of the sessions yet. They're kind of starting today, but I think it is a great resource. And if you're interested in the certificate and being able to refer back, I think it could be really a worthwhile place to get lots of information on the world that we're living in. So on the topic, what's that?
I added the link again into the chat box.
Yeah. And just a caution that when you look at the schedule, the times are on New Zealand time.
Oh.
But when you make your schedule, it will give you the schedule in your own time.
Oh, in the email, right. That's your own time? That's helpful.
But when you're planning, just know that 9 a.m.
Time calculator.
Totally. Wow. Okay. Thank you.
Kaya, since
yes.
we're talking about this, can I just take a second and have an aside?
Yes.
So this eHealth Summit is created by Mindy Silva, and she's a physiotherapist from New Zealand who is the person who does the Wired On interviews. And if you haven't heard the Wired On podcasts, you should definitely check them out. They're really great. It's like a talk show for pediatric PT and OT famous people, like the stars of the PT and OT world, pediatric PT and OT world. And so Mindy has this group of great podcasts, and I think you can just find it on iTunes or whatever. If I can give you the link for that if you need it. They're really interesting. And then about 2 years ago, Mindy started this other thing, which is called the Wired On Collective. And it's a group of physical and occupational, and it can be wider, but it tends to be more PT/OT right now, pediatric therapists that are international. And it's about like $20 a month or something. You can do an annual. And it is this really interesting group of people who you can really, there's learning sessions where people are teaching things, but there's also small groups where you can just be on a Zoom meeting and chat with people. And there's all sorts of very interesting things. Because it's a collective, there's only 2 times a year that she adds new people. But if people are interested in that link, I can share it. July likely would be the next time she adds people. I've done it for about 1.5 years, and I really, really like it. It's really cool to have an hour with 5 people who are working internationally and hearing different things, and you can bring your own topics, and it's very interesting. If anyone wants more info, let me know. Okay, I'll stop now. Go ahead, Haya.
Pam, that was an awesome aside. That was, thank you. I didn't even know about that, so thanks for sharing that. So Barb, I have a little bit of information and a large number of resources that I think could help answer your question. There are a number of assessment tools that are standardized for telehealth use, which probably is not your question and probably is something that you already know. But some of them you can use by using a camera, a dock camera or something that's similarly high resolution that you're pointing at your own desk or table. The recommendation is that when you are doing a remote assessment, that preferably you use 2 cameras. You have a camera that's on you so that you're visible to your student, and also that you have a dock camera or some other high resolution, doc being short for document, or similar high resolution webcam. I personally think that probably a lot of cell phones, if you can position it properly just above your desk somehow, would probably fit the bill. But also both Pearson and WPS are making a number of their online assessment, their administration and scoring tools and test manuals free or significantly reduced price. In one place I saw that WPS was providing free test manual access, but their website says 50% off. So the truth is somewhere in between those two, maybe. I want to share one resource that I'm going to forward to everybody, but I want to share it so people know that it is valuable and worth opening. There is a website called Telehealthshare.com, which I will add to the resource sheet. It's really similar to Teachers Pay Teachers or something like that, but it's specifically for therapists. It looks like it's mostly OTs, but also some PTs who are experienced in creating valuable resources for telehealth work. Some of them are free. I haven't accessed any of the resources that are for money, but I will just share with you, it's not super detailed, but I thought they were good lists of some assessment tools. I'm going to just screen share for a second. Oh. It's telling me I can't minimize Zoom. Okay, hold on a second. This is, I think this was actually a PowerPoint that Melanie Chris, who started Telehealthshare, provided. It's a list of what I find to be a pretty comprehensive list of some great visual and fine motor and sensory executive functioning ADLs. And then she has a report template, which again was for cost, so I haven't used it. If you look towards the end of this PDF, she does have a link. Let's see, the link that I want to refer to is actually at the beginning. She has 6 YouTube videos of telehealth OT assessments, which range anywhere from 5 to I think like 13 or 14 minutes in length. And they, again, this whole thing will be provided. But I'm going to put it right here, which can just, I think, give some insight from experienced providers. There are also, let's see, 2 lists, one for school age children and one for EI age children, of just a number of assessment tools that are this is not the one that I thought it was. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. In any case, the list that I have I'm gonna turn off my desktop share here. Turn it off. Am I still sharing my desktop?
You are not, no,
Oh, I was before though, right?
no.
Oh.
Sorry.
Oh. Well, that's better. That's better because I was having a hard time finding what it was I meant to find. So hold on, I'm gonna show it because I think it's valuable. Give me just 1 second. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm not going to be able to do this right now. I just updated my whole system, and apparently since I updated my system, I didn't give new permissions, and I would have to dig pretty deep. So in any case, there are a number of assessment tools that are standardizable for remote use. The SFA, the DASH, the VMI, the DAISY, The sensory processing measure, the sensory profile are just a short sub list of the ones that are available. So if we do end up in a situation where we are providing it, where we have to administer assessment in this remote setting, just know that there are a number of tools out there. And I would say looking at the Telehealthshare resources will help you find ones that probably match your needs pretty effectively. I'm so sorry that I thought I was sharing that whole time and I clearly wasn't. The other things that I learned, just in short, were thinking about how you're performing an assessment. And I know that this might not be too relevant for people right now, but I'm going to provide the information because it may be relevant to some people sooner or later. Some of the things that are recommended are to enable some fidelity of your assessment. You want to send all of the materials, including pencils, pennies, you know, anything that you might need for assessment, you're going to need to send along. And what's been recommended is that if there are test administration booklets, you want to put that in its own sealed manila envelope that you put like a signature or seal on, and make it really clear, do not open until you're on camera. And then you want to document that you saw the family open the test packet. And also, because you can't photocopy, scan, or duplicate, you know, because of copyright reasons, you also can't screen capture or session record an evaluation and use that to be able to score. So they recommend that you include a self-addressed stamped envelope to return materials, and then that you actually say at the end of the evaluation, you ask the parent to while they're still on camera, place all the materials in the envelope, seal it up, and sign it so that you know that that's all happened. The other things that I've learned are then when you report, make sure that you're reporting what kind of seating and surfaces the child is using, the student is using. You write in there how you made sure that the family hadn't opened the test booklet packet. And also that, again, it's highly recommended that the family uses 2 cameras, which I was like, that is just prohibitively complicated for most families. But the way that I have heard providers kind of getting around that is that if you set up a Google Meet or a Zoom session or whatever your platform is that you're using, they can just sign in from 2 different devices. If they have a laptop or tablet, that can be the direct face with the child. And then they can find a way potentially to mount their phone with the camera facing down as the second camera, so that you can actually watch, for example, and again, this is talking from OT perspective, but what they're doing with their hands or how they're manipulating tools or objects. And then the other thing, it's just like, I listened to a webinar from AOTA, and the OT that was providing it was talking about provision of work samples. And she said, ask parents to send, and this is a direct quote, not the best, but not the worst work sample. And I was like, well, that's highly specific, So just an average work sample of that child with, parameters, what they can write within 10 minutes or 5 minutes, or, what they can write when given a visual model or not given a visual model. So those are most of the pieces of information that I have on that topic. I will share those resources out to the group and share those notes out to the group. But I'm going to pause here and ask, I think we all hope that by next fall we'll be able to provide all of our updated assessments in, a typical fashion and format in person. Does anybody have experience providing assessment remotely and have any words of caution or wisdom on the topic? Or thoughts or concerns? We are all doing this for the first time. Yeah. I think the silence probably speaks
I can
volumes.
kind of speak to that a little bit
Okay.
because I'm doing a fair amount of telehealth and I do, a lot of reeval stuff in there. Have a lot of patience with the families. Even you trying to talk to the kid or talk to the parent about repositioning things, like the term turn it over or turn around can mean so many different things. And then, kind of giving them a list so that they know at least some of the things we're going to be looking at so they can kind of have it dug out of the house. That's really helpful. And I ask somebody to be my camera person. Usually I'm on a phone or something and the kid's moving around and doing stuff. So I usually have the person stay close to the phone so that I can be like, oh, move it up again, move it down again. And so one person is just kind of in charge of that piece. And that's been really helpful during the assessment time. It's not as bad as you would think, but you definitely don't get as much objective data necessarily as you would need for some tests. So it'll be interesting as we go.
Thanks, Heidi. I think you mentioned a list and you started to list off objects that the family might need, materials. And what I went immediately to that I didn't even think to mention, but I think is so important is giving the family a sense of how long it will take and what will be expected of them. And also what you might be looking at so that the family has a little more of a sense of like why you're asking the child to do potentially strange activities. And then also I think differentiating a little bit for families between assessment and treatment or service, right? Like if they're having a hard time with X, Y, or Z, it's totally understandable to want to, step in or show them how to hold the scissors or help them boost them up onto that step or whatever, but, let them do it. Which I think, yeah.
Kind of I wanted to add to that note, Haya, have your other like really rewarding activity ready, so that if there is one or two really difficult things that the kid really needs that motivator for, I can be like, oh, remember, you get to have that whatever afterward. And then I always try to remind them to have like a snack and go to the bathroom before, because that can totally mess up your schedule if all of a sudden the kid has to go to the bathroom and that's not part of your assessment.
Yeah, thank you. That's such a good point. Just, like in any setting, right? We want to make sure that the child is able to show their best foot forward. That was my attempt at a PT pun right there. What? What did you say?
I said nice work.
Oh, I thought you called me a dork. I was like, well, that's true too. Thank you. Does anybody else have, whether I guess from experience or just from based on this conversation or related experience, other thoughts about things we would want to add to the pre-assessment checklist? Probably a lot of the same stuff as any direct service session, right? But probably even a few more things.
Hi, Kaya and everybody. I just want to tell you that I watched this webinar by Brooks Publishing on using the transdisciplinary play-based assessment online. And I think it's like a wonderful assessment to use because it's through observation of play, and you can, they have a lot of support materials, like that list of things, how to get set up like prior to, and they're just really organized. But You can also do it from videos that the family share with you.
Yeah.
I'm just really uncomfortable with going along with the narrative that we'll wait until the fall. You know, when it comes to powerful entities like school districts and so on, because there's really no evidence that anything is going to be better in the fall. Actually, to the contrary. And right now, our risk is absolutely minimum. There are very few cases in the state. So, you know, if we look at the polio epidemic, it was 10 years where life was on hold every summer and life resumed in the winter. So I would just caution into like waiting and not changing our practices for telehealth, or because the kids need their assessments, they need services. Yeah. So the book publishing the transdisciplinary play-based assessment might be like one way to go that is not so hard and demanding as far as sending materials and having like a very standardized way of administering.
Liliane, I think you said so many really important things, and thank you so much for sharing that. I think first, just to your point, I agree with you that I think that I think we're stuck in a limbo space of, on the one hand, you know, wanting to hope that we get to go back to business as usual, and like you said, on the other hand, not necessarily having all that much evidence that that's going to be the case. And so that's, you know, that's personally why I felt like it was important to bring up the topic of assessment, even if so many people have that function currently on hold. I think that, I'd like to hear what other people think too on that topic. But my understanding is that in a lot of cases, it's also coming down from special education directors, whether or not that's something that we're engaging in.
Liliane, can I ask you, is the play-based assessment the same one that was around in the 80s? We were using that a lot with early ed assessment, with a team assessment. It looks like the same one. Mary Ellen Severeid, I see, is on the call. She may remember that as well.
I think that
I do. This is Mary Ellen, Karen. I'm not sure I do. I actually was just trying to do a search and look for it.
So Mary Ellen, it's by Tony Linder, and it's actually very, very modern and actual. Tony Linder did a lot of research on play, the importance of play, not as just a context for therapy, but an actually outcome measure or a goal of therapy, because that's the occupation of children. It's so important. So I'm teaching a class right now to my third year students in physical therapy. And it's just a 1 credit, like advanced concepts. So I've been reading a lot about it, and I really think we need to get this assessment out of, you know, the bookshelf and the closet and revisit it. It's extremely well done.
Good. And I noticed there was a 2 on the cover, so I was curious if the one I'm thinking of may have been the first version.
Yeah, this one is, trying to find the edition.
Well, the one I'm looking at is 2013.
Okay. No, this goes way back. And if Ruth Dennis and Sue Edelman were on the call, they may, we used it back in the 80s. And it was sort of the first time that we shifted from individual assessments to team assessments, especially for preschool and kindergarten level children. We were moving away from that developmental clinic individual assessment method. And I also want to put a plug in for play. And you may want to go back even further in OT literature, back to the 60s and 70s. You're probably going to find a lot of articles on play.
Oh yeah, I'm going back like big time.
Right.
Yeah, and there's even like an assessment, the test of playfulness by Bunty. You know, Anita Bunty is an occupational therapist, and she's at her 4th version, and it's not I think the 2nd version you can find in one of the book of occupational therapy. If you Google like test of playfulness, you'll see like which book you need to buy. But she is on her 4th version, I think 2016 or so, that people are using for research. But it's really big. You're gonna have like a lot of papers coming out in the coming years on play and play-based assessments. But the play-based assessments covers adaptive behaviors, self-regulation, executive functioning, fine motor, gross motor, speech, vision, articulation, what else? Emotional, social communication. I mean, it is the most complete assessment.
Yeah, it's true. I'm glad it's coming back.
Yeah, Karen, I have to say, I remember using it.
Yeah.
Way back in the 80s.
Yeah.
In Massachusetts.
Yeah, that's good. And it's good that things do come around again. We just have to keep them.
Yeah, and I was surprised that Lori Meyer, she's a special education faculty at UVM, and she has a class in the fall that is basically teaching a student how to do that assessment.
Great. Great.
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, the TVPA is really interesting. It's a cool assessment. Lillian, do you know if is it something that can be administered by any discipline, and is it a curriculum-based assessment? Like, do you have to be trained in it, or?
I think it would be better if you do it as a team. You know,
Yeah.
I would have some shortcoming in assessing parts that are not of my domain, but I think you could make a case for you know, collecting observations and then maybe pulling somebody in to further assess at which level the child is on different skills.
Yeah.
Yeah. But because the data collection is not in silo, it's like a play setting. You know, you come up with play sets, if you will, as a team, and then the parents record them or you watch them synchronously, and then everybody's pulling their observations from the same play set. One is like a snack time. There's some that are structured and some unstructured observations.
The other thing that this makes me think about is really how useful observation-based assessments in general are at this time, right? Like even things like the Ehealth they're based on a combination of parent report and assessment, right? So I think one thing that I would love for people to be able to think about is what tools do we already have in our toolbox? I love the idea of using the TVPA. I also love the idea of taking the assessment tools that we have at our disposal and recognizing that like they also can be good enough, you know what I mean? And we're so used to doing these very like involved hands-on assessments, and that also things like the SFA or the PDCAT, right? They have a place, even though we're not necessarily even observing direct performance of the activities. We're using parent report, and that has a high degree of reliability and has a lot of value.
Yeah, I think especially when you think about eligibility for special education, I'm a little bit removed from that, but for example, if you use the PediCat, you have some measures of adaptive behavior. It's a pretty complex measure, but it's a report, but it's normed and it's standardized and so on. And so you might be able to use that along with more of a curriculum-based assessment. Like if we have to go around the rules as far as eligibility. Oh, sorry. My phone's ringing at the same time. Yes, and if we have to advocate for changes to the rule to qualify for eligibility, then maybe we have to start thinking about that if it's not possible to ascertain eligibility through some form of video assessment. It's just, I'm really not very confident that the end of this is too close to us.
Yeah. I think that's such a good point, and it feels like an important direction to move, even if we are hopeful that we can return to some form of normalcy in the not terribly distant future. It still feels like something important that we can continue to educate ourselves on is, first of all, what assessment tools are standardized for use remotely, because there are many. And I think that ultimately that's probably going to be an easier sell to special education directors than overhauling the rules. And I'm totally open to hearing what other people think about that. But I think that if we can go to special education directors and we can say, here's a battery of assessment tools that we can offer, that it's beyond our authority, that we can say that we can standardize them and administer them appropriately from a remote setting. I think that that's going to bolster the case for us to be able to engage in assessment remotely if necessary. And I think that's kind of my my punchline with that. I am what I was searching for when I thought I was screen sharing is another more extensive list of evaluation tools, assessment tools rather, that can be used remotely. It is an OT list. If there are others present here from PT or other disciplines who have come across or want to search for similar documents in their own disciplines, I just don't necessarily have access to all of those same groups and resources for other disciplines. But let's bring those things together, because I think it's better to be prepared and have that information in front of us. Checking in oh, Emily, I don't know how long ago she said this, but Emily also mentioned the help. There's a 0 to 3 edition and a 3 through 6 edition of the help. Thank you, Emily. Yeah. And there are a number of tools out there. I think we may be limited in terms of the ones that we are most comfortable with or are most familiar with, but I don't think we're limited in terms of them not being out there. So I want to make sure that we part ways in plenty of time to be able to rest our eyes before jumping into this town hall that I think many of us are going to attend. I'm going to pause for one moment. I'm going to ask if anybody else has anything else they want to say on the assessment topic or add to the chat on the assessment topic. And failing that, I just want to open up the floor for a few moments, if not more, and ask where people would potentially be interested in going from here. Can't necessarily make any offers about how that will be facilitated or supported, but if there are certain subgroups or topics that people are interested in diving into, or a certain kind of support that you could see potentially Tripscy as an entity offering in the coming months or year. Of course, there's so much unknown, but what would that be? Is there anything that either you want to offer or you can see other people offering or hope other people are offering at this time?
Hi, I would say from looking at the chat that there is interest in further discussion about ESY, and perhaps after the AOE meeting this afternoon, that might give some more direction, but it sounds like an ESY conversation would be welcome.
Thanks, Pam. Is that something, are there, I can't even see everybody's pictures. If you have your video on, oh, so many people have their video off. Okay. you want to add in the chat a yes if that's something that would be interesting to you? Cool.
Getting some yeses.
Pam, you took the pulse.
There were some, like, comments, and some people who had to leave early commented that they would like to hear more about ESY and talk about it some more. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I know that this school year is rolling to a close really soon. I'm thinking like we could potentially offer just to host another time and space that would be available for people to talk about the mechanics of how they're going to do ESY under the circumstances. Does it make sense to others to do it once again on a Wednesday, potentially just to have one more event on a Wednesday? I'm looking at my own calendar now. I'm not seeing.
Yeah, Wednesday afternoon works well.
Yeah, I'm thinking we can just stick with the same time and date we're currently working with, and hopefully that works for as many as possible. Karen says, is there a way to have a timeline on putting together a package on assessment that can be presented to AOE or Special Education Directors Association in the fall? That sounds like a big and interesting project.
Can I say something?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This might be the opportune time. If you're an OT, you too could be the coordinator of Tripscy. And Tripscy, if you have a strong interest in that, the Center on Disability and Community Inclusion, as you may have seen in the listserv, has a OT position that just opened up. We've had Deb Sharp retired, and so there's an opening. The job is a 10-month but full-time position. It is spending about 2 days a week on the I-team in the northern part of the state, 2 days a week on the Continents Project, and 1 day a week coordinating Tripscy, which is double the time that Haya has had this year.
Which is quadruple the time that Pam had the year before that. So Tripscy, actually, my little Tripscy plug is that Tripscy has a greatly expanded scope of work and funding for next year, which includes the possibility, actually includes the directive in the way that we've written the scope of work to bring in providers who have a deep passion and interest in specific topics, and to be able to provide those to the state at a very reduced or even free charge to the providers of the state. It is designed to be, as it is now, a service to providers to help us all build capacity on a vast variety of topics. The really cool thing is that next year we'll be able to incentivize bringing other providers on. So also, if you have a topic that you are really jazzed to bring to others and you want to really build that up as a resource, Tripscy could be a place for you to bring that topic next year. So
Karen said that she knows someone who's applying who would also be great at managing Tripscy. So that's exciting, Karen. And if anyone is interested in that position or knows someone who might be, I'm just going to put the post listing, the listing of the posting. Sorry, my brain is getting addled from the heat. The posting is right there.
Thank you, Pam. Karen also said we should start end of August or early September. I know of someone who's applying for this OT job who will be wonderful to manage Tripscy listserv as well. Karen, I love this idea of, I mean, once we see the direction that that school is going for the fall, which I think we won't know more about for a while, or we may feel like we already know. But I think that convening on this idea of building up our resources and knowledge around telepractice. So everyone keep your ears and eyes open, post that kind of information to Tripscy and Ripsky, or to Ripsky, and let's create a body of knowledge on that particular topic, because it feels like it could be really, really important in the coming months. As for a conversation about ESY, my assumption is that if we just wanted to put it out for 2 weeks from today, that would probably work well. And we'll just, I will mull that over and I'll put something out on Ripsky. Okay. I am also getting really hot and it's not making my brain work super well. Does anybody have any parting thoughts, words, concerns? Another car to add to the train. Okay. So with that said, thank you all for coming and being a part of this. Thank you for participating in just this time together. I know that it's really been really informative for me as a provider, as a consultant. I've really appreciated everyone's input and those of you who've been willing to really speak up. It's been awesome. Again, we will have the recording with captioning. It will be on Tripscy as soon as it can be. The resources and notes will be available as soon as I can put them out, which hopefully will be by the end of the week or early next week. If you would like your certificate of attendance, I will be making those all happen tonight. I finally figured it out for all 3 weeks, so do not fret if you haven't gotten yours for the previous 2 weeks. They're coming. If you'd like a certificate of attendance, please put your name and email address in the chat box before you sign off. Karen says, let's all go outside and do 10 minutes of gardening. I might go jump in a sprinkler. And I'm just going to stay on until other people are signed off. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.